And here we are. You will notice there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on here, and it's all part of the presentation and so on. It has to be. Let's enlarge it. So, what are we going to do tonight? We're going to look at an introduction on leadership and management. Now, I'll move at pace, and we will probably get it finished in time. Actually, it would be no harm if I opened it up here as well so that I could follow along with you. So, to just over a little bit, using this descriptor by a guy called John Cotter and from Harvard Business School, he's talking about leadership and management being two distinct and complementary systems of action. So each has its own function and characteristic activities. Both are necessary for success in an increasingly complex and volatile business environment. So strong leadership with weak management is no better and is sometimes actually worse than the reverse. So the real challenge is to combine strong leadership and strong management and use each to balance the other. Now, there's a couple of key points inside here and that start to jump out at us. And first, we're talking about increasingly complex environment. Absolutely. We often define businesses and organizations and the environment we work in as complex adaptive systems. Sounds horrendous, but it just means that there's so much going on simultaneously, synchronously and asynchronously, that we need to be aware of what's going on around us and beyond, strange enough. But the other key point is that we're talking about management and leadership. And as you see in the next slide here, we have this Venn diagram of one versus the other. Now, it's not so much a case that it's a one or the other. Another very, very good writer called Warren Bennis, American writer, academic, he describes management, or he has a saying that all leaders are managers, but not all managers are leaders. And it's absolutely very true, and it still is to this day inside organizations. And these are some of the reasons why he would substantiate what he's saying. So if we look down through this list here of the basics of managers and leaders, managers do things right. They follow they maintain the status quo. They're short term in their actions, means builders and problem solving. Whereas on the flip side of it, you have leaders who do the right thing. So what's the difference between doing the right thing and doing things right? The manager is very much process driven and sticks rigidly to the set rules, policies, and so on. That's all very fine. You say, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Yeah, yes, it is, to a point. However, do the right thing gives the leader a little bit more maneuverability with his team to take risks, to learn from mistakes, bend the rules a little bit. And God knows, I like to bend and play on the circumference a little bit when it comes to doing things. How else do we learn? Because if we start to do everything purely by the book, it becomes boring, status quo, it becomes monotonous, and so on. We all like a little bit of change in our lives, and similarly inside work. We don't like to have the same repetitive sort of stuff day in, day out. If you want the status quo, go and join the group with Rossi and the lads. Anyway, but more importantly, we like to have a little bit of change. They're long-term, they're visionary leaders. And they're architects to put the right pieces, the template together for people to actually build on the template itself. So to create the environment, the structures for individual and team development. And more fundamentally then, they're more inspiring and motivating as opposed to problem solving. So you get a hint that managers are more reactive compared to leaders who would most definitely be more proactive in I would say knowing their people, knowing how far to push their people because they understand them far more effectively and efficiently. They've built up the right, I would say, relationships with their staff and individuals in their organization. Now, moving on to the actual traits, I've seen many different descriptors and items describing traits and characteristics of managers. And this one is going back, must be 7, 8, maybe longer years I've had this particular diagram. And I've yet to really find anything that's better. You'll probably get variations of it, but this one is probably the most encompassing and hitting some of the really key points in it. So if we start up here at the 12 o'clock, we talk about honesty and integrity. And by way of an example, if you're a project manager, and let's just say that you say to your project team, we need to finish this in 6 weeks. And the guys say, geez, how are we going to do this, blah, 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 blah. And we put all our plans in place, and they burst their butt to try and get it done in the 6 weeks. And let's just say that in actual fact, you've already agreed with your senior managers that it could be ready in 7 or 8 weeks, but you're trying to impress your senior managers for self-promotional reasons, but you've told the team it was only 6 weeks. If they find out your honesty is shot to pieces, you will never get them to do anything again. They'll never trust you. That's an extreme example, but it does unfortunately happen in organizations. It does unfortunately happen. So it's an extreme example, but nevertheless, it highlights the point that you need to be honest and open and have integrity when dealing with people. Okay. Moving on to the next one, the self-confidence. That can be interpreted in many ways, but all I will say about self-confidence is that you need to know the line between self-confidence and arrogance. And if you cross that line, again, you're going to lose followership, you're going to lose people, and you'll start to create an environment that's not conducive to good working space, to say the least. The self-confidence comes from knowledge, experience, qualifications, not necessarily in that order. Well, no, being absolutely honest, in that order: knowledge, experience, and maybe the qualifications. Then it doesn't mean just because you have a string of letters after your name that gives you the confidence. It will help, but really, it's how you communicate and interact with people that gives you the confidence and gives people confidence in you. Okay, so let's keep moving around here. Emotional stability. Am I emotionally stable? That's questionable. Very much so. I would like to think so. Does it matter? Yes, it does actually. I was fortunate to have worked with some excellent leaders, project managers, in previous organizations, and one guy that sticks to mind is a guy called Terjo Nurmi. I've said this in the previous video as well. If I were to describe Terjo, he's a Finnish guy. He is the spitting image of Ronnie Drew, and when we were kicking off projects, Terjo used to have to travel around to all these different projects. And there were always these kick-off parties, dinners, and a few drinks. And while we were on this major project, Terjo was gone for maybe 6 weeks, and he was 6 weeks in the horrors, from all the partying and so on and so forth. But more importantly, over the space of 2 years, it was remarkable to observe, in hindsight, how he behaved as a leader. I never saw him lose the head with anyone. I never saw him get down and shoulders hanging around his waist or anything like that. There was this stability about him, and he actually commanded a phenomenal level of respect as the not so much the go-to person, but that level of how to say, maybe fatherly reassurance or whatever, but authoritative reassurance because of the stability. You get people in some organizations, if they score a goal, they're giving themselves high fives, or breaking open the champagne or something like that. And if something goes wrong, they're looking for heads to roll and so on. So they're extremes. Unfortunately, they exist, but they're extremes. But where you have that more level, even keel, because then you can trust them in difficult situations and in good times as well, because there's that calming effect is extremely important. So to be able to demonstrate that, it has to be inherent in you as a leader. You could be a different person outside that environment, by all means. Some of us do have that kind of switch on, switch off capability. The next one we look at here is cognitive ability, and that really is talking about, of course, I'm sitting in the way of the bloody thing. Get out of the way, Mark. Cognitive ability is your awareness of the environment around you. Your awareness and how in tune you are with the people that are in your immediate environment, in your team, in your organization. Are you on the same page? Are you tuned in? Are we sending the right signals and so on? That kind of cognitive ability and awareness of the environment around you. Really important, but more precisely, your awareness of other people's emotions, other people's feelings, intents, and so on, and how we pick up on these signals. And we'll start to exploit these or talk about these later on. Knowledge of the business. Remarkably, the number of people who are actually in organizations and don't probably know how they function correctly, how they actually manufacture products, or how they deliver services. They're just up at higher echelons in an organization, and they sometimes feel that's beneath them to want to know this sort of stuff. However, the likes of Kawasaki and Toyota and so on, whether you're the newest janitor or vice president of sales and marketing of one of their divisions to join the company, they all spend up to 6 months on the production lines. Everyone. Know the fundamentals, know the basics, know what you're talking about at least. That's why knowledge of your business is so important. Now, if you're a specialist in marketing, of course, you'll have all your theories and knowledge and so on. But knowing other stuff outside the organization, that's of value in the business itself. So these are the kind of knowledges we're talking about. Otherwise, you won't have respect from followers, from the team, and indeed from peers within your organization if you don't have that, I should say, knowledge of the business. One of the great exemplars of that is Willie Walsh, not the other fellow from Bison. Oh, jeez, Louis. Come on, Louis. Anyway, Willie Walsh. He came up through the ranks in Aer Lingus, and this guy thoroughly knew his business. No, okay, he's in the headlines again, creating a little bit of a stir. But by God, this guy knows his stuff. Whether it's air traffic control, baggage handling, flight preparations, flying the planes, of course, all the functional areas, Louis made it his business in his professional development to know these functional areas. Not to be the expert in these, but at least when he interacts with someone, we say in traffic control, he doesn't come down and demonstrate, oh, I know all this, that, and the other thing. He can converse and interact with the person because that person then knows that Louis knows what he's talking about, and he to use the expression, he can't be bullshitted. But that's not the point. Dewey doesn't try to extol that type of leadership or management in himself. He just wants to be able to talk openly and practically and precisely with people in particular areas. The only way to do that is by knowing your own business. Then, of course, we move on to the next segment, which is drive. And where drive... and I was going to say drive you around the bend, but no, drive is literally your stamina, your self-motivation, the reasons why you literally get out of bed and go into the job in the morning. What motivates you, and having that emotional stamina to keep going. And remarkably, over the years, again, guys I would have worked with and worked for, it was remarkable to see how they would have changed their image and taking up sports just to be physically fit, because if you're not physically fit, you're going to find it difficult to be mentally fit as well. So getting that clear space, that's why I alluded to cycling. I like to cycle a little bit. Why? Because it gets me out. It gives me a little bit of headspace where I can take what I refer to as my brain dump, just clear out stuff and clear my head as such. It might be gone for a couple of hours or so, but it's enough each time. And I focus on doing what I'm actually doing at the time. But it's great to try and keep myself some way fit, And fortunately, I can still bend down, tie my own shoelaces, and get back up again without getting dizzy. Don't believe it, saying this sort of stuff. But having that drive, it's critical. And one guy, he was an MD of Ericsson actually. He took up jogging and marathon running, just to be fit, because it does put strain on the body, to do the job. But more importantly, because you're so empathetic and emotionally switched on, you're absorbing a lot more, so a lot goes into your head. You're picking up a lot more. You're picking up all the nuances, the non-verbal communication. So your head does, to use the expression, become a little bit fried. But over time, you know how to manage these type of situations and keep going. All of these previous elements here, from drive right the ways back to honesty and integrity. You may have these in abundance. You may be really good ticking the boxes in all of these areas. But when it comes to leadership, unless you actually want to lead, all the rest of the stuff is redundant. And again, people now in the context of leadership, that people think they're being promoted up into senior echelons of business and so on and so forth. That's not necessarily the case. You may be running a small team of technical experts or business experts or a business group or whatever, and you might be asked to lead that. You have to want to lead. You have to have that desire, because if you don't have that, then the rest is pointless. You can't force somebody to lead or take the figurehead position as the leader and so on if they don't want it. Can you incentivize them to do so, or as such? Quite possibly. Sometimes it's again, if you know what makes them tick, what makes them, what motivates them, might be enough to persuade them to want to take on leadership roles. Now, we do have mechanisms in organizations that in the private sector certainly, where we can elicit the knowledge and the expertise of people, their tacit knowledge, and making it more explicit, because we feel that they can be more contributive to the success of the organization in various roles. They may be technical experts, they may be mentors, they may be coaches and so on in that role of leadership. But again, this has to be trashed out with the individual themselves. So fundamentally, the desire to lead has to be there in the first instance. Some people like to work on their own, and some people like to lead from behind. And a really efficient organization, or a mature organization, can see that in certain individuals, that they don't want the nameplates or the offices or the adulation or the McDonald's staff of the month. Not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's. I would advocate go in there and learn the tremendous organization. But they don't need all the trappings of leadership. They can be quietly operating in the background and driving a team from behind. And then, it's often said that the best of leaders actually lead from behind. So at this point now, which I didn't kind of cover last Monday night, this is where the first assignments are of crucial importance to you. Now, you will find that in some of our discussions and presentations that there is overlap between myself and Dave, and some areas and Teresa, and maybe in next semester you'll find overlap. That's purposefully done. That's why it's an integrated leadership module or program. They're not distinct modules. It wouldn't really make sense, because we work in a complex, adaptive environment. We work in an environment that's highly integrated. So we actually would have spent some time over the summer looking at areas of where we can overlap and augment each other's elements. And I'm quite sure Dave might be referring to reflective practice, and as I will be referring to leadership and so on. And you begin to see the bigger picture as it evolves over the course of this semester and more. And then these, should we say, tools, models, techniques, processes that you'll be exposed to over the coming weeks will then form the fundamentals of the second semester, and more importantly will all dovetail into your work-based learning project. So you will hopefully be armed with this repertoire of our arsenal of new ways of thinking and looking at things to benefit yourselves more in your work-based learning program, but more importantly individually as you develop professionally, and looking at things from multiple different perspectives. So coming back to my point about the assessments, I'll just blow myself up here. Don't say it, I know what you're thinking. You're doing the first three pieces of assessment will be on learning style, Myers-Briggs, MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator, and emotional intelligence. How to go about that? The briefs will be pretty explicit, but to get your kick started on those, use the interweb as, what's the name? Rowling says out of Fast and Loud, use the internet, interweb. Google sites to find suitable questionnaires. And when you find the questionnaires, don't pay for them, for crying out loud. There are thousands of them that are there free. Trust me, I might have some indicators or some suggestions in the assignment briefs. I can't remember. But and go to sites that have a lot of questions. Don't get one, for example, if you're doing a personality test, 12 questions and bang, yes, I'm an EXFJ or something like that. Well, there's no such thing as X. ENTJ or something like that. Don't go to those type of sites because they're useless, they're pointless. Go for the more comprehensive sites that have a lot of questions, and you will actually find that some of the questions might appear to be repeating themselves. They might be slightly differently worded, or you'll come across that, geez, I thought I answered that one, 10, 15 questions previously. You may have, but there could be a subtle twist in a particular section of the test that they're asking you, and they might be just trying to validate, are you telling the truth? Do not, all these questions, all these type of psychometric tests are measured on a Likert scale, which is, a scale of 1 to 5, or least satisfied, most satisfied, and least likely to use, most likely to use, and the in-betweens. For heaven's sake, don't be marking yourself with a 3 all the time, or don't know, right? If you do, you'll end up, buy yourself your own straitjacket, and sign yourself into the mental hospital, because it's you'll come out as bland as God knows. You wouldn't be anything, to be honest with you. You'll have to answer the questions, and some levels of extremes will become evident. More importantly, when you're answering the questions, answer the first thing that comes into your mind on the question. The first response, go for that. Don't try to prejudge or manipulate or second guess the questions in the belief that you might be able to manipulate the overall result. It's possible, but very, very unlikely to be able to do so in a very controlled way. Simply because these tests have expanded over many years now, particularly on the internet. So the database of samples is huge. Hundreds of millions of samples across various databases, and a lot of them swap and interact with each other, which means that when you're being measured against a larger population. So you'll fit in, they'll fit you in, or your personality will fit more precisely into particular categories. So you'll have one of 16 personalities. So answer the question, first thing that comes to your head directly, and you'll get a result of a particular personality type. Now you will find that, for example, if you take the Myers-Briggs test, you'll either be an E or an I at the start. E is for extrovert, I is for introvert. That doesn't mean that as an extrovert you're going to be totally out there, swinging out of the rafters and fun and games all day long. Of course not. Nor are, if you're an introvert, are you going to be huddled up in the corner, boo, afraid to come out into the sunlight. You won't be extreme. You won't be anywhere near 100% in either case. You will fall somewhere maybe 45, 55 in favor of extroversion or in favor of introversion. You could be 65, 35, those kind of ranges. So essentially, the four letters that you're given in the Myers-Briggs will be your dominant characteristic. Because in certain circumstances, we can be extrovert, and in other situations, introvert. Now, I'll let you in a secret. My dominant characteristic, and has been for a number of years, and still continues to be, is an introvert. And it will be leaning towards 47, 48% of extroversion and 52, 53% introversion. And it's been like that since year dot. I do actually take these tests myself every few years, because as you get older, things tend not to change. However, there are conditions where your personality can change dramatically, such as a traumatic accident, for example, or a relationship breakdown, or close family bereavement, and so on. So it can have substantial impact or a serious impact on your personality, and change your personality. But they are the reasons for personality change. But in general, normal day-to-day life and so on and so forth doesn't change your personality over a period of time. So you'll get these four. Then and of course, then you'll do a learning style. We all have different learning styles. Some people like to have visual stuff. Other people like to see chunks of text written down or wordage and documents and so on. Personally, I don't like that. I'm a visual learner. I like to take chunks of text and put them into diagrams to make it. But there's a method in that madness, because if I can take all that stuff written in books or articles and condense it down into one diagram or a couple of diagrams, then I have I know that I understand it, and then I do it in such a way that I can try and communicate it through visuals to other people, and it's actually one of my own self-developed strengths over the years, and that's because I used mind maps when I was in school and got into a fucking load of trouble over that, but that's a whole other story I'll tell you about. But so your learning styles are your kinesthetic, or your visual, audio, and so on. So it's good to know how you learn such that you can adapt to the different situations. And then the third part of your test is your emotional intelligence. This is probably one of the more important psychometric tests that you can do, because, and I'll tell you simply, is that when it comes to emotional intelligence, how we connect with people and how we want to connect with people is fueled by our cognitive ability and our emotional intelligence, insofar as that oftentimes we fall into this trap of trying to portray a particular image of ourselves. We all do it from time to time, as it happens, and sometimes we do it all the time, and not sometimes we do it. Jesus, there's a contradiction. God Almighty. Individuals do it a lot. Okay, they like to create a perception. And unfortunately, perception is a lot. So you create a perception of yourself and you spend a lot of emotional energy feeding that perception. But here's the catch in it. You think this is working for you, whereas in reality, it's not. People actually see through most of it. Do you know the expression, you can see through the bullshit? Essentially, yes. Because so much of our communications is non-verbal communications. You're into about 80 or 90% of our communications would be non-verbal communications. And that's what our cognitive ability or our emotional intelligence gives away. I often use the example, if you've ever watched late night poker, the professionals and so on, they look for the tell. What is that signal that your man has a good hand of cards, he's a royal flush or whatever the hell he has, or he has a lousy set of hands, or indeed what you might have. And it could be a subtle little, nerve twitch in the neck, or it could be a slight little elevation of the blood flow in the lobes of the ear. It could be a sudden blink or twitch. And these guys are masters of controlling these. Sometimes they can do it to send out the wrong signal and confuse people. Now you're into the realms of what's known as neuro-linguistic programming, where we can actually control behaviors and we can modify behaviors through nonverbal communications. It's a fascinating area of study. You would find it oftentimes in certainly in the intelligence agencies, MI5, FBI, CIA, and places like that. And one of the original writers of the techniques and processes was a guy called Erickson. His book was so damn good, they took it off the market very, very quickly because it was giving away too many of their processes and secrets and so on as to how. And organizations do train people. I had some training myself in the early 2000s when I was with a Finnish company. Excuse me. Just let me get some of this. I'm having coffee. You're not having a break. Excuse me. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, I haven't trained, but the specific training in this area was in around negotiation and contract negotiations and dealing with other companies and cultures and so on and so forth. So watching out for signals and symbols and so on, and that kind of advanced tracing. It wasn't about how to get state secrets out of people. You don't even have to do that. Sure, they'll tell you that themselves. Look, isn't Harris in trouble for? Oh, Jesus. Oh, God help me. Yeah, so you wouldn't have to use those advanced techniques, but if you do, and you are aware of them, be very, very careful, because you don't know if the other person has been trained similarly, and it can be an absolute minefield or a disaster. Point in case was once I met the HR director for Citibank above up in Dublin, a lady, and I came in. We were negotiating some kind of a deal, and straight away she put out her hand from behind her desk, which I went to shake, and I had to lean forward, and I found my hand being turned ever so slightly. You can see that on camera. So she had my hand turned like this, and it was very limp, kind of. And I said, my immediate thoughts. I said, "Well, you thundering bitch! Who the hell do you think you are?" These were the thoughts that were going through my head, and I knew why that this was happening, because what was actually happening was, come over to my terrain. I'm in control. These are my boundaries. I'm in control here. And by subtly changing her hand grip on mine, she was forcing mine down. So her palm, the back of her hand was up, mine was down, meaning I'm in control here. I felt that. I knew it. The meeting was a total disaster, waste of time. I couldn't wait to get out of the room. And what I found more remarkable was that even though she would have been using these techniques, the arrogance of thinking that I might not have been trained in it, or that I was going to be a lamb to the slaughter, so it's dangerous if you try to overuse these techniques. Do I use some of them today? Absolutely. And I won't tell you what they are, because Siobhan is in, and she'd only tell everyone else as well inside the college. Sorry, Siobhan. Jesus. Oh God, this is all on camera. Mother of God. So, where was I? So the psychometric test, your emotional intelligence. So answer the questions and as honestly, and the first question that comes into your mind, and then sounds like the Bill and Ben story. And then when you have the answers and the results, I just want you to trap the results, put them into a Word document, and write about a half page ish of what you thought of them. Did you agree? Were there surprises and so on? Now, not a whole lot, half to three quarters of a page. I don't want big manuscripts. Short, condensed analysis of you and what you thought of the results. Were they surprising or not?
So, sorry, Mark, could I just ask, where do we get those? Did I miss something there? Are they online, or where do we go for those psychometric tests?
Question coming across to me: where do we get the psychometric tests? Are they online? Most definitely online. Just literally trawl through Google, type in leadership style, or not leadership, learning style, then go off and do Myers-Briggs or MBTI style, and then do emotional intelligence.
Okay, and then we write about it. Is it, Mark? And then we give it into you. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, follow the brief that's uploaded into the assessment, and put it into a Word
That's what I
document.
was asking. Is it an assessment? Sorry, Mark.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So you're doing the psychometric test, you're getting the results, and then you're going to write a short little piece on the results, put that into a Word document, and upload that as an assessment. And I'll sit down and I'll see how what you think of yourselves, and then I'll mark accordingly. So I have a rubric or a mechanism to mark the results, to mark your submissions against.
Mark, is this the first assessment? I'm really sorry. Is this the first assessment that we have to do?
Yes, it is. It is the first assessment. Yeah. Okay. No, no, no worries. Just if in doubt, shout. That's
Thank you.
no. You're welcome. You're welcome. You all caught that, yeah? Okay, good, good. So, but trust me, oftentimes, fair play. Catherine was asking questions there, but in actual fact, a lot of people would be, will I ask this, will I ask this, by all means do. If, as I said, if in doubt, shout, because I can guarantee you, if you're in any kind of doubt, there are other people inside the class or in the room or online that will also be in doubt. So don't be embarrassed. It's as long as it's legal, you'll be all right, you know. So yeah, as I said, don't be embarrassed, to ask questions at any point, and but all I'd ask could you raise your hands to ask a question, because when I'm talking, and even though I have an earpiece in, it's only eventually I'll hear something in the background, and then I can pick up on it. But if I can see a raised hand, then I can stop. I don't follow chat because I find that's a bit distracting, and I did already have a class earlier on where the guys were having a bit of a chat across to each other on chat and about joining groups and all that, and I was very at the point of closing it down, to be honest with you, because what's going on here, I'm trying to do something, and the guys are saying, well, we set up a chat group and all. Anyway, you can do all that yourselves. But anyway, it's just a matter of protocol and etiquette on how best to maximize our time together as such. So where was it? Oh yes, they're the first three tests, and then later on, the second one will be on your leadership style and followership style. And I'll come back to that again. And then the final piece would be more, again, the leadership style and the followership style, again, will be psychometric tests from online, and you'll actually do the same thing, kind of short synopsis of the styles and your interpretation of them. And the last part then will be the reflective report, and we'll come back to that. I'll do a special video closer to the time on what I'm looking for in the reflective report, because you'll have to learn the techniques or learn the process or be exposed to all of these over the coming weeks, so you know what to do. But you will use the information that you used in the first two assignments, the first two groups of a psychometric test. You'll use that in the final part. Okay? All integrated, as I said. There's a sense and a reason. So if we look, moving swiftly on from that diagram that we were looking there on the leadership traits, and how am I doing on time? Oh, jeez, 20 past 10. I will be finished by 10:15. That won't be too bad. So if we look, then we have management, as I said, are focused on processes, facts, and so on, and they're based on their position power. I am the manager, therefore do as I say, blah, 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 position power. These are all, you'll find these, for example, in Charles Sandy's books about organizations and the different positions and power structures inside an organizations. But essentially you have position power and expert power and all this sort of stuff. And sometimes by just having the title, people assume that they have the power to do this, that, and the other thing. Unfortunately, that's not leadership. Whereas on the leadership side, you see, you can have this more persuasive power. And they purposely say persuasive, not coercive power. Coercive power will fall on the other side. Persuasive power on this side. Why? Because they can talk you around. They know what to do, how to do it. They are cognizant of your feelings, as we say above up here. They're emotionally intelligent, switched on. They have a heart, not of stone, but they're human, and they demonstrate this. And there's persuasive power. They're again, some people will recognize, these type of people. Have you ever gone into one of your, we'd say your managers or bosses or leaders, with a problem, and looking for a solution to this, and you walked out with 3 problems and a bucket load of more work that you took on, and you wonder, what the hell just happened there? They are true leaders, and they do exist. Now, that's not to say that they're doing it out of malice and so on and so forth. But in actual fact, what they're doing is they know you know the problem. They know you know the solution. They're giving you the freedom to go off and explore. They're probably presenting you with alternatives for you to go off and figure out and discover yourselves. And you're going away thinking that you've got a bucket load more of work than so on and so forth. No. That's the cleverness of the intellect of good leaders. Okay. That's not to say that you go out now and upload, if you're in the position tomorrow morning, here, go off, everyone else solve my problems for me, But in any case, that's what it's alluding to. Possibility thinking, which I just mentioned anyway, they're more proactive and so on. And their vision is a big thing. So they see the bigger picture down the road. That's fundamental to good leadership, Whereas these guys look at goals. And when we say these guys, I'm talking about managers, it's very much because it's management theory and management styles have been heavily influenced by American writers. And we're very much following the American corporate type structure and so on, which fundamentally is, show me the numbers. The Jerry Maguire, show me the money kind of thing. So everything is measurable. And they don't really have a lot of time for the soft side of stuff as such. Whereas if you start to move back towards Europe and you move towards Scandinavian countries and Nordic countries and so on, they're very much of a more socialist type cultures and societies, and they tend to be more people-centric as such, and less of the hard numbers and so on. We're caught somewhere in between a lot of the time. It depends on who it suits and what it suits in the situation. Does that mean it's wrong? No, of course not. We need to be adaptable, but we need to be able to work on both sides of the Atlantic, so to speak. So then stroke the fire within people as, again, know what to drive and so on, moving down. And they mentioned down here, standardization versus innovation. In other words, innovation being the process of how you do things differently, how you develop things. That's innovation. Creativity is the spark of genius where you come up with something, or invention could be a new idea or a new process that you're thinking of. Morphing that thought or concept into something actionable is innovation. That's why when you ever, from here on henceforth, when someone says to you, which comes first, creativity or innovation, tell them that Professor Mark Cashin said creativity comes first. No two ways about it. Innovation comes second. But I'm only quoting what other people have said. And the logic of the argument is idea, concept first, then realizing it, making it actionable is the innovation. Because so many things can happen during the innovation phase of it in terms of the way you do things. Which brings me on to the final, not tonight, the final 2 words of reflective practice. While I'm here, I might as well give you the end of the story and show you how we arrived at it. You know the way they make these films, you see the end and then they go back 6 months or 3 years and bring you through the whole saga and say, that's how it happened. Well, that's what I'm doing now. Reflective practice has 2 sentences. What did I do previously? And how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? I'm going to say that again. What did I do previously? And how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? Now, I emphasize the word way. Why? Because it's process. So how you did something, the way you did something yesterday, last week, 10 years ago, now you think about it and say, how can I improve on the way I did that back then? How can I improve on that now? That's reflective practice. There's only one element that you need to add to it for thorough or for completeness, and that's emotion. How did you feel about what you did? And how are you feeling about what you're about to do in terms of your learning? What time is it? 9:30. I'm going to leave you with that. I'm not going to go another quarter of an hour, half an hour, or anything like that. Because what I've just told you are the fundamentals of reflective practice. I know there are another few slides on this. I'm letting you off the hook by looking at the already recorded information. What I've said and covered up to now, I'll take that out separately and I'll post that up there as well. Because those last few comments that I made are absolutely critical to the understanding and where you're going to, the journey you're going to arrive at, going to take, and the destination you're going to arrive at. In a sense, those 2 sentences, what did I do previously and how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously? That's the vision of where we're going. And as we do this constantly asking ourselves these questions, we're actually performing what's known as Kaizen, continuous improvement. Some of you may be aware of this and would have experienced this in organizations, continuous improvement in quality control and quality processes and manufacturing processes and so on and so forth. But equally, as it works in those environments or in those situations, it works on you as a professional because we are continuously improving ourselves. By virtue of the fact that you're sitting here listening to me a Thursday night, could be worse, could be a Friday night, after half a dozen bottles of wine. No, by virtue of the fact that you're sitting here inside in the class, absorbing stuff you already have started or are partway through your journey of continuous improvement. It's all about, I mean, how you learn, how you adapt, how you enable yourself to want to move up in an organization, move out of an organization, change your career, and so on, so on, so on. Did I think I was going to be a lecturer 20 odd years ago? Not a hope in the world. Did I think I was going to be in software engineering, messing around with advanced computers when I was doing accountancy? Nope, I didn't. Did I enable myself as time went on? Yes. Put myself, and the one thing I will say from all my experience is that no learning goes to waste. Whether you learn it tonight, whether if you learned it 20 years ago or 40 years ago, it never goes to waste. One simple example was when I was running projects, pretty advanced technical projects. One of the reasons, and my colleagues remarked this to me, is, why are your projects always getting the green light to go ahead and so on, and we always have to either jump through the hoops or this, that, and the other thing? I said, it's simple. I said, we all have the same basic technical knowledge, yeah? And they said, yeah, but we have degrees and this, that, and the other thing. You don't have that. And I said, no. I said, I understand the technology. I know the business I'm in. But I said, here's the operative word, business. I was able to put the correct valuations on the projects. And that was the angle I used to sell the project. Said, this is how much it's going to cost you. This is what you're going to get. This is when we can have it ready. The other guys weren't as sharp with their cost estimations. Let's just put it that way. So I had used past learning, past knowledge to augment what I was doing. Roll on 20 odd years, and then when I was doing my doctorate, one of the parts of the doctorate, which I'm feeding into you guys over the course of this, we had to do something like a lifeline, where we had to go back and look at peaks and troughs in our careers and what changed, what influenced our career development, what courses we'd taken on and learning and so on and so forth. And it began to stand out that there were trends and patterns in our respective professional performances and so on. And that's what I particularly found fascinating. And we had to write and discover all this at that advanced level. So some of those techniques I take into this for your benefit, because would I be where I am today if I had reflective practice? No, I would probably be someplace else altogether. I don't know. I honestly, well, I do know. I would be probably doing something totally different to what I am doing if I was armed with that skill set as we say maybe as a teenager or in my very early years. And as I say, knowledge and hindsight and all that sort of stuff. But it would have been nicer to have it and to be able to have the choices by knowing these techniques. But anyway, that's only my little story. But sure, what of it? I mean, as I said, I'm closer to the exit than the entrance. So it doesn't particularly matter to me right now. Anyway, you can see these comparisons down along here. Processes versus people. Leadership is dealing with people, feelings, emotion. All of the points I've been alluding to and mentioned explicitly this far. Persuasion power, and rather than coercive power. You see managers' position. I am the manager, therefore you do as I tell you, kind of stuff. Whereas in the leadership, they don't need that. They don't rely on these and titles and so on and so forth and positions to achieve results. Possibility thinking, in other words, look for opportunities, creative, critical thinking, proactive, and so on and so on. And they have a vision and they have a set of values and a shared set of values with their staff and employees and team members. And very good at verbal communication. And as opposed to written communication, they can do both, of course. But personally, not because of leadership management, personally, I prefer verbal communication, although my written word is quite different in many respects. the way I express myself in writing. And one of the reasons is because as you're writing stuff, you're actually thinking a little bit more. You're actually reflecting on what you're doing as you're writing it, whereas sometimes you'd splurt stuff out in verbal communications. But the real reason why verbal communications in leadership context is important, because people can see the nuances, the signals, the hints, the tells, the giveaways, the expressions, the gestures, the non-verbal communications. That's why it's so important in a leadership context. Just look at any of the guys, famous world leaders, Barack Obama, and for example, the way he speaks, the way he delivers his verbal communications, and so on, so on. There's any number of people. And then the last point, standardization and innovation. That's status quo versus non-status quo. Thinking of things, constantly innovating or changing the way we're doing things already, as opposed to standardization. Follow the process. Process doesn't, yeah, if it doesn't fit within the process, then people don't want to know, or the manager says, no, can't do with this, blah, blah, blah. Don't think outside the box, in other words. And I know that's a horrendous expression, think outside the box, but my God, it's ever so true. We have to provide that kind of environment where people can actually think more freely. In terms of the pure leadership, we have essentially charismatic and transformational leadership. Are they distinct? No. And let's look at the charismatic leader here. So creates exceptionally strong relationships between the leader and the follower. So now, in terms of relationship, we know where, as a leader, where to draw the boundaries. It doesn't mean that you're going to become best buds and all this sort of stuff and go out drinking every weekend and going over to each other's houses and all that sort of stuff. Some people interpret leadership as that kind of collegiality and openness and so on and so forth. Whereas in actual fact, by definition, when you look at your leadership style, that can actually fall into the realms of country club manager. They like to be popular. They exist. So you have the pure popular, people focused, and then you have project managers who are, okay, I'm off the screen, people managers and process managers, project managers, essentially, aimed at objectives, and somewhere in between you have, and then down the bottom corner you have these guys called the impoverished managers. If you fall into that category, are you doomed? Absolutely not. That's where some real stars shine, but we'll come back to that when we're talking about these categories and leadership and evaluation. So they articulate a clear vision. They can say exactly where we're going, to a point. They won't be absolutely explicit, but they can share a future state of an organization or a project with the team itself, based on values, what they already know and what they believe, having assimilated all the data, the information around them. Model values consistently with the vision, so they're true to their word, the integrity and honesty. They don't break agreements. They don't, they operate with the utmost integrity. You can trust them, and that's the key word in any organization. Trust. Out of that comes respect, and then the rest is all building blocks. Display confidence in followers' abilities, and that takes a level of self-confidence to be able to say, I can take a chance on this person. I believe that person can do it. Just in the right conditions and right circumstances, that person can perform better than they're already doing. And that's simply by knowing their staff. And that's a really key point. Knowing your staff exceptionally well, knowing their limits, knowing what makes them, what drives them and what doesn't drive them. So if you have a look at these two, then they have the ethical and unethical. So provide developmental opportunities, open positive and negative feedback, recognize others' contribution, share information, and concern with the interests of the group itself in terms of the ethical type of charismatics. Then you have the unethical, control and manipulation of followers, do what's best for themselves. So now you're moving into the ego side of things. And here's one for you. Mother Teresa would fall into had fallen into the unethical charismatics. A number of theses that analyze her behavior and so on and so forth, from the people who actually worked with her, found that she was actually, the label they were putting on was a toxic leader, which I will talk about in more depth later on, but not tonight, obviously. But toxicity in organizations exists. If you have been unfortunate enough to be exposed to extremely toxic environments, my heart goes out to you. But they do exist. And how do we cope with these things and so on? But you do have these egomaniacs in organizations, unfortunately, and essentially toxic leaders. But equally, you also have toxic followers. And you say, well, what's a toxic follower look like, and does he have a tail with two horns on him, like that sort of character? A toxic follower could be the guy that's in the background always stirring it up. You know the kind of persons I'm talking. I'm sure you've come across them, but there's always someone that's egging on. Go in there and say that, Mark. Go in, you're on the ball. Say that. Do you think they go in themselves? No. Or as it's referred to them as, they'll pull the pin, throw the grenade, and then they leave the room. But you do have them. So you do have the followers equally, and they're equally as bad as the toxic leaders. They exist in organizations, and there are ways of creating interventions in this, and we'll come back later on. And as you can see, like the toxic or the unethical charismatics, which is probably a polite way of calling toxic leaders, to use a more modern terminology. Best for themselves, want positive feedback only, and are motivated by self-interest and so on and so forth. So so all the opposites to the above. And then you have these behaviors of the charismatic behaviors, ethical charismatics. Power is used to serve others, leading from behind. Followers help to develop the vision. So their ethical charismatic leadership, they include people. They develop the plans, they develop the strategies, in an all-inclusive manner, eliciting people's input. Two-way communication, pretty obvious. Open to feedback, so people have been able to take it on the chin, negative and positive feedback, and having that level of self-confidence that you can take negative feedback and use it constructively for your own professional development or personal development, whatever the case may be. Want followers to think and to question the status quo. And that's critical, because again, when we're looking at the self-confidence and the drive and so on for those key elements down there, when you're eliciting feedback from followers, tell me the truth, tell me what you feel. When I was having some of my appraisals in the latter half of my career, and I go into my bosses, and I would say to them, right, tell me what I'm not doing so well. And the Finnish people in particular, we don't, we'll give you the feedback. I said, look, I already know what I'm doing correctly. Tell me what I'm not doing correctly. I said, at least that way I can improve, and we can exploit the stuff that I'm doing well. We can make that even better. But the stuff that I'm not doing so well, give me that feedback. And it took a couple of iterations before they would agree to give me, well, Mark, you could be doing this a little bit better. You need to tie down some of your processes and blah, 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 blah. But at least I was getting feedback. But again, that it's an interesting topic of conversation, whether it is with age, or with qualification, or whatever, that would have that level of confidence. But then again, I had always worked on every job I took on, or role I took on in an organization, my own personal vision and goal for that role was to make it redundant over a period of time. In other words, work myself out of a job. And for that reason, I became a little bit of a thorn in the side of some of my bosses, because, oh geez, yeah, he's gotten that done, and all the work is so well defined and bad, delegated out, everyone, so the team is carrying it on, and I'd say, right, what's next to be done, kind of thing, I don't know, maybe that's odd. I don't think so. I mean, a lot of people would think like that. Why? Because they like challenges, they want change, and so on. So 3 virtues: courage, sense of fairness, and integrity, carried right through the whole scenario. I'm going to, because we're under time pressure, I'm going to let you read down through these, but the unethical, they use the power to dominate others, and so on. So all the mirrored opposites of what we just looked at in the previous, insensitive to followers' needs and so on. So they're and that's where everything starts to break down. First and foremost to go is trust, and then of course respect. All of that starts to clamp down because people close in when they start experiencing these unethical type situations. Sorry, I'm getting out of the way of the screen. Move down to the side. These unethical type behaviors. So Reducing risks of this, so having a clear written code of ethics or code of conduct within an organization. And this is how we have to mitigate. We have to put this stuff in writing and be more and more explicit as to our conduct and so on, which is fine. At least it gives us some level of guidance in what's accepted and not accepted. Recruit, select, and promote managers with high ethical standards. Now that's going to be difficult, so that's where our assessments have to come in, and looking at past records and performance and the rate at which performance would have taken place. How quickly a person shot to stardom inside an organization. Was it through sheer ability, or was there something else at play that might have questioned ethical behavior, and so on and so on. So you need to look at these, because oftentimes you bring someone into an organization and they may have all the credentials in the world and perfect for the job, but may not just have the personality. That's why there's so much effort and energy or money spent on psychometric testing. Certainly the higher in the organization or the more senior roles you're applying for, these tests become far more rigorous in the number of interviews you go through and the assessments, because it's so costly if a company gets it wrong. Hire somebody and say, sorry, probation, 6 months, 3 months, no fit, no can do, start the whole process all over again. So they like to try and get it right the first time, which is fine. It's expected. Train leaders how to value, seek, and use diverse points of view. In other words, that they're not overly confident. In other words, their arrogance doesn't blind them to feedback, input, constructive or otherwise, from people. Sometimes you get people inside in team meetings and so on, so that won't work and this won't work and you can't do that and you can't do this, and and the general consensus, oh Jesus, Mark is an awful naysayer, he's awful whinge and gripe and so on and so forth. But in actual fact, they might be adding something really valuable, and oftentimes they are. Sometimes we refer to it as black sheep leader followership, and sometimes we have black sheep leaders. So they're radical to the point that they can sound, they're outside the norm, they're outside the normal thinking of the group as such. But what they're doing and the value they're bringing is that they're highlighting, they're not sucked into this group think type of a situation where everyone follows along like sheep, which does happen, unfortunately. But these guys or ladies say, well, if you do this, this is the consequence. So they're thinkers. They're looking at things from different perspectives, and this is where we're trying to bring in when we look at leadership and critical thinking and the skill sets that that you can augment, which I'm sure you already have anyway in various levels. But to be able to take it to these next levels and understand these, and then celebrate and reward those who exhibit ethical behaviors. So reducing this, so looking at how we nurture and cultivate true leaders or true charismatic leaders, and mitigate the unethical side. Transformational leadership, I know I'm cutting it close here, excuse me, generates awareness and acceptance of group's purpose and mission. So get followers to accomplish more than so, and essentially transformation management. Often a very well used term, and organizations moving from one level to the next are changing, could be changing market, changing processes, being redefined, a new org chart and all this sort of stuff that goes on. But essentially we need to or if an organization is in having difficulty in surviving or maintaining their profitability and so on, they need to transform themselves, and that's where you have really effective transformational leadership coming in, and that really does bring into power the effectiveness of followers. Some levels of management, because we have to be very clear about the objectives in the short term. We need to get this, achieve this, and measure it, bang, bang. But the upside of it is, it's not just about achieving the objectives and measuring and say, yes, we need to do this or else we're all done for. We need to be able to measure these, to be able to feed back and say, we're accomplishing stuff. See, here's the results. Here are the results. We're achieving, we're moving things forward. So now we get the momentum going such that the leadership begins to supersede the pure management by objective type kickstart that the organization needs in a transformational environment or challenge or transformation strategy. So the components of transformational leadership: Charisma or idealized influence, inspiration, motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. So yeah, almost the same of what we've defined and spoken about, already tonight. Inspiration and motivation. Setting the standards by um, do as I do, not just as I say, kind of thing. So being an exemplar of how to achieve work ethic. Now that doesn't mean that you come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and stay there until 10 o'clock at night and expect everyone else to do it. Sometimes that can backfire, and people say, "Jesus, Mark, you've got lousy time management. You're spending half the time in here." One colleague told me of a guy that in a consultancy in London a number of years ago, and this particular character had a reputation of being a really hard worker and spending phenomenally long hours inside in the office, and so on and so forth, and was a little bit on the reserved side, quite introverted sort of chap. And my colleague who spoke to him on a particular function after a number of months, when he broke the ice to get to talk to him, said, "Jesus, Dave, he said, I have to admire," I said, "I heard a lot about you. You spend so much time inside here. You're the first in the morning and last out at night." And, I said, "How do you keep that pace going?" I said, "It's relentless." And he said, come here till I show you." I have to zoom this up. Big zoom. He said, "Come here till I show you." He said, "See that car down the car park? That cost me 60 quid. No? The car cost me 60 quid in the car park. The perception was that the car was always in the car park first thing in the morning. It was stationary there. He just moved it around from one parking spot to another over time. True story. But did it work? Yeah, it did for him. Anyway, where am I now? Just wrapping up on the last couple of bits here. Oh, productive states, unproductive states, disconnected from people. When we look at emotional intelligence, as we move towards self-awareness, and this is where I'm bringing you. We're starting in the middle here, in this middle part of the diagram. You're going to start evaluating your own self-awareness through these tests and so on and so forth, and then we move on through into the present and the future state as we go along. And then if you look at the last one down here, unproductive states, you're indifferent, you couldn't care, you've no drive, you've no commitment, there's nothing motivating you. Therefore, you need to get some positive influence. Could be other characters, could be a threat of a job loss, and so on. But in any case, we empower ourselves to become more contributive and effective within our own organizations, ultimately. And lastly, the final thoughts from this guy, David Goldman. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, if you are not able to manage your distressing emotions, you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. So, in other words, encapsulating all of those points and qualities, attributes, traits that we spoke about earlier on, you need to work with people. You need to be able to interact, and that's where the leadership comes in, even if it's only self-leadership, right up through the echelons inside an organization. So, folks, just let me reduce and close, and we'll go back. Yippee! Any questions? Comments? Insults? Jokes? Even?
I won't be able to sleep unless I get that joke about the consultant in London. You may run us through that. I don't know if anyone else got
it. One of my colleagues, he was working with a consultancy company in London. This character in the company had he knew about this guy who's, had great reputation, spending long hours inside there, and the perception was that he was spending morning, noon, and night there, coming in first in the morning and last to leave in the evenings, and that he was, really hard worker, and but almost treated like a god. These people that are the super experts and nearly embarrassed to go up, or he'd be afraid to ask him a question. He had that kind of persona about him. And purposefully so, because he didn't want people disturbing him or really knowing what he was doing. The car, when Ollie, Ollie was the actual guy, the colleague of mine, who was talking to this guy on a social function. After a number of months, he braved it. Ollie is an organizational psychologist. Asked the guy, he said, God, he said, you do have a tremendous reputation. He said, and how do you avoid burnout, coming in so early in the morning, leaving so late at night? And he said to Ollie, he said, see my car down there in the car park? And I said, yeah, that's the one. It's always there, the last one in the evenings, That car cost me £60. The engine didn't even work in it. He used to push it around, but because people knew it was his car, it created a perception they was spending morning, noon and night inside the place. No?
I thought he was sleeping in the car first go around, so I'm glad you got the.
I know this isn't the 20th century. This isn't in the 21st century now where people do that. I've worked with characters who, before emails and internet was really powerful, guys used to come into work in one company and send emails at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. They drive in just to create the perception that they're working late. Seriously, now you can do it. You can post date or predate your time on your emails if you're into that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's it's all about perception, unfortunately, and of course, as I said to you, people will see through the perceptions and they will get the genuine article or not. You try to present something that's not really you, and people will see through it. That's life. That's the nonverbal communications. So, folks. I know we ran over a little bit, and we will try and keep it a little bit more contained. This is recorded, obviously. It's recorded on Zoom, but I don't use the Zoom recordings. I'll fine tune this and I'll put it up onto YouTube, as I said, onto my channel, and a few other bits on it, the introduction and my own introduction that you didn't hear, but yeah, there's no point in wasting time anymore on that. And it will probably be closer to Wednesday by the time I get to do this at this stage. And then I have to do it all over again for Thursday night for the B Club as such. Now, I might use some of tonight's with them and vice versa. I might edit and post it, but that's life.
Well, the links will be on
Moodle. Absolutely, yeah. You literally just click on the link and it will fire you straight to the YouTube channel. And into your playlist, and the actual lecture will appear inside there. And
and it'll normally be a day or two before you'd have it up there.
Yes, as it is. Let me see what it is. I might actually have first draft of it tomorrow night. I think Tuesday night is my only free night of the week, and so you might be lucky because I have you Monday nights, obviously. Then I might be able to get some time to do this tomorrow night. It takes a bit of processing. About an hour and a half, 2 hours work to get this ready for release, premiered even. Any other questions, folks? Or
No, I just want to say thanks, Mark. It was very informative and I enjoyed it. But I do need to go now because my dogs need to go to the toilet, so I need to let them out. But I'll see you next week, and thanks a million.
Not all, you're more than welcome. Yeah, good one. I like that, the dogs. Okay, folks, listen, on that note, I'll let you go and we'll see you next week, please God, all right? Unless there's any more questions. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Not all, you're welcome. We talk again.
Thank you. Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much. Good night. Thank you.